We have a very interesting guest, Cindy, Deployment Strategist in the FDE team. And I say very interesting because first, Cindy, before you talk about what you do, what is an FDE team?
So FDE stands for Forward Deployed Engineering, and FDE as a person is a Forward Deployed Engineer. And the team is meant to sit in your company as an embedded set of skill sets working for you, but also with you. So the idea is no longer is it advisory, no longer is it 30,000 feet up. It's actually engineers sitting with your engineering team, going through the day by day, and that's what makes it powerful.
And what you as a deployment strategist do?
So back to the deployment strategy question. So we find that a lot of companies have an understanding of what the business problems are. They have an understanding of what the technical solutions are and the technologies. However, a lot of times they struggle to merge the two in the middle, right? So business is doing business, engineering is doing engineering, but a deployment strategist takes those big business ideas and they decompose them into solutions, and then they drive the build of that solutions with co-located engineering teams, forward deployed engineers, and so on and so forth.
And this role is fairly new, right? So what do you see change? What was the change that made this role so relevant to the problems of the customers?
Yeah, so I think in some essence, this role has been around in various different ways. So for example, if you take traditional consulting, they were very, very good at looking at what the business problem is, right? And so I think the role now is really popular because of that decomposition bit. So the understanding of taking that business idea or the business problem, but really understanding the value of the implementation or the solution, that's where the deployment strategist differs from a traditional analyst or a consultant. So I would say a consultant would come in, evaluate everything, and make recommendations. Deployment strategy is all about understanding who is there in the company and then where best to augment that existing team with the skill sets that you might have in an FDE team. And so you put your engineers directly into the teams in a most effective way.
So that what it tells me is that now there is a big emphasis on being in the team, being with the customer, right? Because you mentioned, right? So what does that look like in practice? So how do you work with the customer and
So I can talk a little bit about my previous project. And so the latest project that I worked on is for an app company. So I won't get into the too detailed about what that application does, but it's a mobile app. And I think this is novel because people think about Databricks as a data company or a data platform company, which it certainly is. However, it's been going into the app space, it's been going into the user application space as well. And now taking the idea of the apps as the base and having someone to implement what apps means for your business, that is deployment strategy. So the day-to-day looks like I talk with the PMs at the companies. I consider myself almost like a product owner. So I do a lot of user research, understanding user flows, and trying to figure out what's the best thing to build. And then part of my day job will also be running Scrum. Though I don't like doing it, but it's a necessary evil to make sure everyone is aligned and figuring out what to build on the ground and actually building at speed.
Yeah, it's fascinating because as long as I was so far in the Databricks ecosystem, we usually talk about pipelines, data engineering, governance, but when you talk about your role and what you do, is equally about the business problem and the application, and probably there is a pretty strong data emphasis in those, but it seems like that the scope or what Databricks as a platform covers is significantly expanded. So is that your view also?
Yeah, 100%. And if you look at the announcements from this Data AI Summit, of course there are the core data announcements, right? But if you look at what Reyden is, which is Reynolds Dream Engine, I think it stands for that, which I find is...
And we should emphasize that the name is Reyden, not real time.
Yeah, exactly, Reyden. And Reyden is, to me, the most exciting part about anything announced today. And the reason why is the idea that you can go from being a lake house to something that serves real time and front end.
Yeah.
So the idea that no longer do you have to wait, 30 seconds to a minute for analyses, but you can drive predictions in real time. So let's say you are an e-commerce company and you want to predict what is going to be bought in one of your stores and when.
Yeah.
So the engine that is Reyden powers Lakebase, which will be your OLTP database. And what that means for organizations is if you have an engine running on top of OLTP, that means you can serve those predictions in real time at the point that the data is generated.
Yeah.
So then you can say, okay, for this store here in, let's say, Manchester, wherever we are, we predict based on the last 5 minutes of user activity or the footprint in the store, we predict that this item is going to sell out. So you can start moving logistics potentially based on real-time analytics at the source rather than having downstream analytics.
I think it's a bigger change than I think most people realize, because historically when I started in the data world, I was always on the data warehousing, Hadoop, big data, and that was all read-only. So we put the data in one place and we get out and analytics.
Yeah.
But over time we started to power more functions like a recommendation engine. But what you describe is now very closely integrated into business processes like ordering inventory for the Manchester shop. So who you work with, because I assumed it means to me that the data is way more today than just warehousing and reporting. So
so warehousing and reporting are secondary operations, right? So they are meant to serve BI.
Yeah.
And business analysts have traditionally always taken in, for example, Kafka streams or data that is batch processed and figuring out, okay, so using all of the data that I have, what kind of aggregations can I use? What kind of modeling can I use? And it might run overnight.
Yeah.
Now it's a little bit faster than overnight, but the problem with all of those is that it's not instantaneous. And sure, there's plenty of room for overnight processes, and still there's plenty of room for these ideas of like batch processing, but most of the things that we do as humans are real time.
Yeah.
So I know, maybe we talk about Gen Z, but Gen Z is very, very into instantaneous reactions. Well, I call it instant gratification, right? So I have a sister who's much younger than me, and she does not wait for anything. So she doesn't like lines, she doesn't like waiting for responses, but why should we wait as analysts, right? So I think the idea that you no longer have to have analytics and data as a sub-process, but you can start doing all the things that you currently do as a secondary process in real time at the very start. You can potentially even save on costs or infrastructure or complexity that way, because your database that serves production could be the database that also serves your analytics as well.
And do you see that this new capability and this almost like merging the different functions or getting them closer changes what a head of data or a CDO is responsible for? Or how do you see that?
So that's an interesting one, because I haven't actually thought about that. That's a very good question, because I traditionally see OLTP and all of the production grade systems as part of the CTOs.
I think usually it is.
But this really does merge what is CIO, CDO, and CTO's responsibilities. And I think maybe organizations need to catch up a little bit, right? So I think the best CTOs, in my opinion, have a healthy understanding of all of the business functions that it serves, right? And so you have different layers of CTO. You have CTOs that are product. You have CTOs that are just only technology. And now I'd like to think that there are CTOs who push the boundaries of getting into data and analytics. And there's probably many of them around here today, because data and analytics are their core. But they need to start thinking about what's the most optimum way that we can serve not only our end users, but understanding the business processes and serving the business processes that run on the platform.
I think you're right, because even if I just look at the requirements of a CDO now, there is very little things, even if you serve internal customers or your customers, that does not involve some kind of data. Yeah. If I look at a bank application or a retail mobile app full of the features that you described. Yes. And so who you work with in your work? So is it business, is it CTO, is it CIO, CDO? So what's your typical cooperation looks like? Because
I don't think I have a typical one because it really depends on the organizational structure, right? Yeah. So on any given day, I could work with the CTO or the CIO or the CDO. It doesn't, for me, it matters less. The thing that matters most to deployment strategy is finding where the value is. Yeah. And I know everyone's like, oh, business value is so important and business value, it actually makes a lot of sense to start there and build right to left. So Databricks, being a data platform, traditionally people have migrated data and start to build on top of that data. So you might build some lightweight analytics. Dashboard, machine learning, oh, we're gonna step into AI, but that's expensive, right? AI is expensive. What we like to do is think, what is the business problem on the right? Yeah. And is that a big enough problem in terms of time, in terms of money, in terms of people's well-being, that it needs a solution? So that's where we start. And then we work backwards about finding the optimal way to build a solution for that. Of course, we need to answer is there data? Yeah. Do we have the process mapped out? Ontology is another big one, which is, do we understand the mapping of our data to the mapping of the business, right? And so if you think about business value as the shiny North Star, how do you decompose that into a problem statement that you can use technology to address? Yeah. And that's my job. So wherever you have something like that, you can find it in any department. So I think, monologue short, traditionally Databricks was very geared towards data technology, but now everyone is thinking about business problems. Yeah. Because AI is a solution looking for a problem. So let's find the problems to find the best fit for the solutions. And do you see new problems becoming solvable through AI that in the past might not have been? Oh God, probably. Yeah, probably. But I think even more so, more traditional ways of solving the problem should be tried first. Yeah. So akin using a lot of the large language models, I have a great analogy for this, which is you have a nail and the right tool is a hammer. Yeah. But for some reason, you've decided that you want to hit the nail with a bus. Okay. Will it work? Maybe, probably. Yeah. Like if you hit it hard enough, yes. Yeah. So I see a lot of people working endlessly in the bus, which is the large language model, to get it to obey. Yeah. But the problem at hand is a nail. And so the right tool might be a hammer, which might even be statistics, right? Yeah. And so people still need to find the right tool for the job. And it starts from the boundaries of which you can work with. Yeah, okay. What do you see most customers don't get about Databricks? Or how do you see sometimes you talk about what's possible and they recognize that, oh, this is not what we thought? Or Yeah, there's a lot of that because traditionally Databricks has been a data company, right? So we cannot get away from that. The direction that we are moving in is very clearly on end user facing infrastructure. So if you look at Lakebase, if you look at all the announcements around Reyden and real time and all that is to serve the end user. And so I had a bunch of people come up to me and ask, how do I do Spark optimizations here? Or I've gotten the question, what is FDE a lot? And people are starting to get an understanding that Databricks can do apps, and not just Databricks apps, but apps, like end user facing applications, because it's got the infrastructure to support that. Lakebase, in my last project, we stress tested it, and it can handle up to 100,000 requests per second, no problem at all. And this is one of the first forays that we have into serving, big loads, big workloads. So the idea that now you are competing with all of the open source databases, but also all of the hyperscaler native solutions for the OLTP part of your architecture. That's one. And then the second is serverless, right? So you saw the micro apps. That is to compete directly with functions or lambdas. And the reason why is the hammer and the nail analogy again.
Yeah.
You don't need big, arduous clusters to do a lot of the work that is intended. And I think basically the architecture that Databricks can support now is getting wider and wider and wider.
Yeah.
And so the idea of building something end to end is now truly possible.
And especially now that you mentioned micro apps, I made yesterday the point that I think that's one of the most underappreciated announcements, simply because apps was already possible on Databricks, but often because of the cluster, it did not make sense from an economical point to start something. So I assume that a lot of customers, and some I know, who wanted to start something, but it wasn't that important at the time. But we might have seen that the app become popular if we could just do that and run it as a micro app. So now I think there is this opportunity to start small and see if it becomes big.
Yes.
So it might open up a lot of opportunities. So I really like that you emphasize a lot business value, right? Because this is one area where, I personally work with CDOs, head of data, who wants to prove to the business that the tech is worth the price. But they struggle often for a variety of reasons. And I'm really interested in how you see that. So how much you are involved in the discussion between tech and business. Where do you see that, this is where it starts to break down, or this is where I see the challenge or the bottleneck? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I have been through so many conversations where someone has a great idea. And that great idea is something that everyone agrees is a great idea. But then it breaks down when someone has to pay for it. And essentially, that great idea does have a cost, right? So I was recently talking to a colleague about this idea that you could potentially marry financial data and banking data, and basically use that to identify fraud. So, for example, if your grandma gets called and all of a sudden you see $10,000 being wired from her account, it's probably fraud. Because grandma doesn't spend $10,000 at a time, right? So the idea that open information sharing and collaborative efforts on the modeling and so on and so forth to do fraud detection is good for the world. Everyone agrees this, but then who pays for it? And this is where the dialogue starts to break down, because all of these things have costs. And even though we agree that this is all a great thing to do, at the end of the day, someone has to foot the bill for the AI components, for the storage of the data, the compute, and so on and so forth. And that's the conversation that tech has. Business often doesn't have that. And business says, okay, I have this idea and it's worth this much to me. And somewhere along the lines, that starts to break down. So maybe the grandma example wasn't the best, but I've seen a really good example where business says, if we optimized our procurement processes by 1%, we are a large enterprise, and it'll save us literally $100 million. That's a great statement. It's open-ended enough for a deployment strategist like myself to go and try to find where that 100 million optimization sits. So I go and speak to Sally from procurement, I go and speak to Mark from supply chain, or I go and speak to Andy from logistics. We try to figure out where is that optimization, and then build targeted solutions for exactly that purpose.
And so that means you come in the picture when they might have a problem, but they might not have a solution, right? Because often business teams only voice their ideas when they also know how to solve this. So one area that I would like to hear your opinion is sometimes businesses don't want to commit to a number because you ask them how much. So the example you said,
I've had that before,
it's
yes.
1%, and say,
Yes.
yeah, it's let's say $1 million.
Yeah.
But when you say, okay, but we need to put that in a business case, so we can pay the bill, then they suddenly become less sure or less willing to do that, because once it's writing and for whatever reason the 1% does not materialize, then they are on the hook for. And so how do you see that, or did you have that conversation?
Yes, and the solution to that is time to production.
Okay.
So it's a little bit counterintuitive because you're building the thing to address a problem,
Yes.
to know how much it will solve.
Okay.
So let's say in the past, without AI, your build for this business solution would have taken you 18 months. Now it'll take you 3.
Yeah.
So your barrier to entry for building or starting to build is actually much lower, and you can start to hook into your existing data sources, build lightweight models, build algorithms on what you know and understand, and then just ship it and understand how your end users are interacting with that solution within the span of a couple of weeks even.
Yeah.
So now you don't have to wait 18 months of human labor, time, costs from an infrastructure perspective to know that is this the right thing to do or not. So the time to production is something that we try to hound into our FDE team is, can we build this more quickly?
Faster, yeah.
But not at the cost of, networking and security needs to be there and governance needs to be there. But what's the core of what we build? And how does that address the problem? And how fast can we do it?
I heard we talked about FDs with someone in this week, and he said, I'm not sure if the number is true, but the underlying argument is, I think, true. He said that if you look at all the spending in IT in the last, let's say, decade, and see how much benefit or how much return on investment they had, actually it doesn't cover it. So we spend more on IT than what it brings back. And so the initial thinking, okay, so we should not have IT at all, but that's not the answer, because
No.
because the reason why it's larger than what it returns is not because of the cost of a successful project, it's the cost of the failed project.
Yes.
So we have so much or so many failed projects that ultimately it's the bill is just too high. And what you say is if we can successfully get in 6 weeks, 6 months to something that was half a year, 18 months, then the cost is lower. And so it means that we can try more or we have better results. And that's what you also assume, that's what you also expect.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it comes from the fact that everyone's trying to reinvent the wheel all the time, right? So you are company A, you don't talk to company B who's done it before, so you do your own version of what company B has done. And so I think this is the value of something like an FDE team, because we don't work in isolation, we talk to each other, and we end up sharing knowledge.
Yeah.
And we're also quite senior in our roles, and we've been there, done that.
Yeah.
And I think the value of been there, done that in an AI world is liberating, because it allows you to go at speed with the direction that you think is right. And oftentimes it's right because you've literally done it before. Sometimes it's not, and that's okay, but then we failed fast. And at least you know that that failure ends up being a learning experience for the next project, right?
All right. So if I'm a CDO and I really adamant that I want to show the business value, what are the top 3 things you would suggest me to look for when I talk to my business teams?
So actually, I was saying that maybe it shouldn't start at the CDO. I think be bold and talk to the business users, talk to the COO or the CPO or whoever it is, and collaborate on what that value is, because I guarantee you the business knows the value, and we just need to be able to marry it to the data and subsequently understand what to build to really bring that value to life.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much, Cindy.
Thank you.